Very warm welcome to this week, 60 minutes of analytical review of the big stories, topical issues and all the controversies around the world. I'm Som Sambo. In the headlines, West African countries get set to contribute troops to build standby force to enforce ECOWAS deployment orders to sack Niger military junta and restore constitutional order. And renewed pressure on President Bola Tinubu and ECOWAS to relax the fresh economic sanctions on Niger due to the sufferings of citizens in the landlocked West African country. Stay with us as we bring you these details. Now, tensions are escalating between Niger's new military regime and the West African regional bloc, ECOWAS, which has ordered the deployment of troops to restore constitutional order in the country. ECOWAS leaders arrived at the decision at the end of an extraordinary session in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, where they instructed the deployment of a standby force to restore constitutional order in Niger after a Sunday deadline to reinstate ousted President Mohamed Bazoum expired. Some Western officials told the Associated Press that Niger's junta had told a top US diplomat that they will kill President Bazoum if neighboring countries attempted any military intervention to restore his rule. It's unclear when or where the force will deploy and which countries from the 15-member bloc will contribute to the standby force. Now, conflict experts say it would likely comprise some 5,000 troops led by Nigeria and could be ready within weeks. After the ECOWAS meeting, neighboring Ivory Coast President Alassane Ouattara said the country will take part in the military operation, along with Nigeria and Benin already showing interest to deploy troops.
Committee of the Chief of Defense Staff to activate the ECOWAS standby force with all its elements immediately. Order the deployment of the ECOWAS standby force to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger.
They're keeping President Bazoum as a hostage. I personally consider this as a terrorist act, and we cannot let this continue. We have to act. The position of Côte d'Ivoire, which has been endorsed by all of the head of states, is that we have been able to tell these putschists that their place is in the barracks.
And upon arrival in his country's capital, Abidjan, the state television quoted President Ouattara as saying, and I quote, "The heads of state agreed to deploy troops from a number of countries, including Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast will provide a battalion and has made all financial arrangements for the operation if it is to last 3 months. Provisions will be made at the budgetary level so that our soldiers and officers who will participate in this operation do not lack anything. So Ivory Coast is ready. Ivory Coast will provide a battalion and has made all the financial arrangements. We are determined to install Bazoum in his position. Our objective is peace and stability in the sub-region." End of quote. Meanwhile, parliamentarians in the ECOWAS parliament at a meeting on Saturday, have been left divided over the actions that should be taken to address the Niger coup. While some are in support of military action against the Niger junta, others were against it. 22 parliamentarians took part in the virtual extraordinary meeting. Also, a planned meeting today by West African Chiefs of Defense Staff in Accra, the capital of Ghana, was called off by ECOWAS, to discuss the coup in Niger, which meeting couldn't hold, and it has now been postponed indefinitely, and the postponement came at short notice. But how prepared are member countries to contribute troops towards the military deployment amidst calls for a more diplomatic approach to the issue? Well, to break down the issues, we have joining us retired Major General Henry Ayoola, who is a former Chief of Defense Research and Development at Nigeria's Defense Headquarters. General Ayoola is a well-decorated fellow of the prestigious National War College here in Nigeria, and he's also a member of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. He holds 3 master's degrees in electronics and electrical engineering, strategic studies, and international law and diplomacy. Thanks so much, General, for joining us.
Thank you, Somna.
Well, you would have seen all that's been happening in the past 48 hours. President Ouattara, who is one of the neighboring countries to Niger, is insisting that President Bazoum must be brought back to power and brought back alive, and that nothing must happen to him, while the Associated Press is reporting that some of the coupists have actually said that if there's so much pressure and war breaks out between them and ECOWAS, that his life may not be necessarily guaranteed. What do you make of these threats and counter-threats? And the ECOWAS parliamentarians also meeting, and they are divided over the issue. The West African Chiefs of Defense Staff were supposed to have met today in a meeting called by ECOWAS, but it was called off at short notice. Yeah,
thank you very much, Sumner. I think we can see, all we see is some high-wire diplomatic moves. As far as I'm concerned, let's look at it from the first principles. You know, I asked the question, what is the strategic end state of ECOWAS? What are they trying to achieve? You know, I mean, as an engineer, I think mathematically. In mathematics, there's what you call probability. You do not talk of probability of an event that has had no previous performance before, or a previous occurrence of that event. You know, so we ask ourselves, the state of Guinea, Chad, okay, Mali, and Burkina Faso, these are the same state, and that's why I call them fans of mutual admiration club. You know, and that's the state Niger is coming into. And you are telling us you want to restore. So what happened when these 4 previous ones happened? Was ECOWAS not around at the time? Were they able to revert those
Well, there were
moves?
some sanctions against Mali.
Sanctions,
but
not reversion.
Burkina Faso.
So
the interest now is, why are we going to war with Niger?
For me, it will be too ambitious for what President Ouattara is saying to achieve that. I think they need to set a more concise, precise, achievable, strategic end state. In which case, they are thinking of how quickly can a return to democratic practice in that country should be. So usually, I mean, when people plan coup, you come to this point is to say, look, what's your program for returning the nation back to constitutional processes? And make it as short as possible. I think that's a more achievable and more feasible end state for me. Because let it not look like the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The same problem. I made that point at the beginning, in the 24th of March, 2021 or 22, okay? It's over a year now. That look, what is the end state? Because when you are going into any military operation, the definition of the strategic mission, we then come to the point when you look at it, okay, so what are the means available to you? What are your means, ways, and methods of achieving that end state? Okay, is then you can, of course, I appreciate the fact that ECOWAS has deployed several multi-pronged diplomatic moves, I mean, I like the short-term diplomacy we've been seeing. And when you look at the quality of the statesmen that have been involved so far, it will tell you something. And
yet the coup leaders are unwilling to yield. They are not ready to free President Bazoum. They've gone ahead to have a prime minister in place, and then a transitional cabinet, and then, of course, they've put in place governors in the regions.
Yeah.
What does that show?
That's to tell you they are totally unruffled by all of the threats and the noises that have been made. Because they have a program. Okay, but while I've said it again and again, I'm not a fan of any military coup, in whatever form, in whatever guise. But I'm saying, we have to be realistic. If there were no previous such reversion, on this kind of, on the premise of this kind of conditions being given, why do we think this one will be different?
Well, the use of force, lethal force by ECOWAS here.
That is still a threat.
And President Ouattara of Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, is already saying that he's going to donate a battalion and the funds will be there. Do we have the capacity to quickly form the standby force? And can this standby force make any difference if they indeed go ahead with the threat of their deployment?
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at it this way. The concept of a standby force has been there. How many times have we activated it effectively to get a thing done. We know about ECOWAS, we know that about operation in Sierra Leone, you know, and then of course the latest thing we can look back to is 2017 when Gambia, when Yahya Jammeh was forced to accept the result of the election. But when you look at the conditions surrounding those and the conditions precedent to achieving that feat, look at Gambia is just immediate neighbor south of Senegal. That was a very simple operation for Senegal to champion. Now, but when you look at the geographic setting of Niger, Mali to his west, okay, Chad to his east, Burkina Faso to his southwest, okay, and then of course Guinea far away a little there,
and then Algeria, Libya,
now, so
and all of that.
It means this operation is going to be based on strategic lifts. How many armed forces among the remaining 10? Because 5 are out of this, of the 15 members of ECOWAS. How many of these 10 have the capacity for strategic lift of their troops? What of the issue of interoperability among these countries, of their armed forces? I mean, considering the peculiarity of language, culture, the issue of incompatibility of even weapons and equipment, there is the issue of electromagnetic compatibility of communication equipment among these different. The issues are endless. So it's not as cheap, it's not as easy. And like I said, for me, deep in my heart, from my strategic instinct, I know that all of these are still in furtherance of deterrence, compellence, escalation, and brinkmanship. And all of these are still within the purview of diplomacy. Okay, for a threat to be credible, you must push it to this verge, to this brink.
So you still consider it a threat?
Oh, yes.
Including those words that came out that ECOWAS is deploying a standby force.
See, let's come back home. Let's come back home. With the grand swell of consensus against the use of force, you think our president will go ahead to go and fight? It's not possible.
Well, he's the chairman of ECOWAS. If
he's chairman of, in fact, that's the only reason why we are this deeply involved. Ordinarily, if our president was not the chairman of ECOWAS, we won't be this deeply involved. And we need to separate that. We need to separate that these old decisions are ECOWAS decisions, not Nigerian decisions, not President Bola Tinubu's decision. I mean, so far, what we have is that this is a listening government. We have seen how they back down on the issue of how to share the loan from World Bank because there was a consensus against giving out 8,000, naira per family. That didn't make sense. And they back that. That's a good listening government. So with the amount of consensus generated against that move, I don't see our president going ahead to go. And by the way, look at these presidents that are saying they are ready. Are you really sure that these decisions are theirs? Are there some remote influences bringing them to this point? Are they speaking or re-echoing the voices of some masters behind the scene? Those are things we need to interrogate.
Or the US
I don't want to go that far. But let's just look at it that way.
Okay, now let's talk about our capability as the center, the epicenter of the West African region and ECOWAS itself, Nigeria. There are talks about the troops that may be contributed to be about 5,000, while others are saying it's going to be more than 5,000. And there are talks here and there that even if we're deploying 5,000 at the start, that half of it may likely come from Nigeria. Considering the internal security challenges that we have, can we afford to deploy, 2,500 troops immediately, assuming the Senate gives it back into President Tinubu?
Okay. Thank you very much. That's a good question. It's presupposing that if the Senate changes its mind, let's leave that aside. It's hypothetical. But with the engagements of our armed forces currently, to say that our armed forces have been overstretched is an understatement. Okay, so, don't forget in the military, we are trained to know, not just believe, that all things are possible. Of course, if the commander-in-chief of the armed forces gives a directive, that will be a national security presidential directive. That's the strongest and that's the highest it goes. Of course, the service chiefs are not going to say we are not capable. or we are not able. No, I mean, you don't ever think in that line, talk less of saying it. So, of course, they will have a way to muster them, but at what cost? And whose gain? And to what, in national interest are we serving? Will that serve us? So, and don't forget, even all of these countries we're talking about, they all will be doing this at some premium price to their own economy, to their own security, and so on. And even the issue of home-based support from their own people. These are all serious issues.
Now, the issues of an ECOWAS standby force is not only the military component. There's a civilian part of it with the police and all of that. That's what the ECOWAS standby force is all about, just like we have that of the AU and all of that. Now, talk to us about this potential standby force even staying for long, because we hear President Ouattara saying that he has made provision for about 3 months. So that means Ivory Coast on its own part is already planning for 3 months. So if we have a standby force, can they within 3 months be able in a potential war, if they decide to put boots on the ground, now achieve that mission before the end of 3 months? Or you think we could have a huge task on our hands because of the talks here and there that this could be another proxy war like Ukraine that may not end in 12 months?
Yeah, that's what happened to wars that you cannot precisely define the end state. At what point will ECOWAS have achieved this goal, whatever the goal they are setting? At what point? How do you determine the end of this? And so how sustainable can it be? Okay? So these are the serious issues. How sustainable? And what do you want, at what point, what will you have done to say, okay, we have achieved this? Is it until the military regime in Niger backs down and gives up and say, okay, we are not holding power anymore, let the president come back? Do you see that as a foreseeable reality?
Of course, you and I know the answer.
So
because even if the president comes back and is reinstated, these guys will still be around.
And don't forget that the head of this regime and who headed the coup is not the most senior person in their armed forces at the time. They have a 4-star general. Have you thought about it? What happened? How does a presidential guy plan a coup within the presidential palace? And there was no resistance. Initially, we were not sure whether the higher command of their military will accept it. But we saw the way they succumbed to
quietly.
It. Now, there's something still brooding. And that's an area to actually exploit and try to interrogate further. And there are some further diplomatic moves we can make through that, to get, the people to break their resolve, rather than talking of use of force.
And despite the threats of boots on the ground, these coup plotters have gone ahead to form a transitional government undeterred, warning everyone that if any aircraft passes through the airspace, they are prepared. Despite the subtle talks here and there of the Western powers also backing ECOWAS, how come these coup leaders are undeterred? They are not shaken. What exactly is giving them this sort of confidence to withstand a potential ECOWAS force?
Yeah, very simple. Don't forget, they are also members of ECOWAS. They know the strength. They are members of Multinational Joint Task Force, which Nigeria is also a member, Chad, Cameroon, and Benin Republic. So they know the capacities of the different ministries. Don't forget, there's so much affinity between us. Look, if I want to put it graphically, a war against Niger, for Nigeria, is like a civil war. It's like fighting ourselves. That's putting it graphically. That's why you know that it's a no-go area.
Can we afford this war?
And so when you look at it that way, these guys are trained officers. They are generals involved. Some of them training. I've been in different courses, Staff College, War College, with some of their senior officers. Some of them who came here as defense attaché and so on. We know one another. So they know the system. They've been part of the system. So they know what is a threat. They know what is a credible threat. They know what is a futile, phantom, pseudo threat. They know these things. So there's nothing you are telling them that is strange to them.
Do you think if President Bazoum is actually, taking off from the hostage situation he is and is freed, that could also help to lessen ECOWAS' decision if they decide to free him and not hold him hostage, could actually lead to a middle ground development that could halt boots on the ground?
Well, keeping the President Bazoum really is not an issue. That he's not in power anymore is a big deal. Even if they release him, don't forget in our setting before, it happened before, when the former head of state was held for almost half of the tenure of a new regime, incarcerated somewhere nicely. And, of course, they will only determine, they will look at the consequences of giving him freedom and having the leverage of maybe consulting or talking to the outside world. If it does not serve their purpose, of course they won't do it. They won't do it. But that's not even the issue. It will amount to, an uncanny simplification of the entire issue. Because when you look at it, we are not looking, for us as a people, ECOWAS and Africa as a whole, to gain and learn lessons from this incident. I mean, it was George Santayana who said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to relive it. Now, this thing goes beyond coup. We should be asking ourselves, what were the causes? What were the conditions precedent that fueled this coup? Okay? Like it has happened in those other countries. What are our leaders, the African, civilian leaders, because we really are not practicing democracy, the African civilian leaders, what are they doing wrong that are creating the leverage for the military to even be thinking of a state back? What can we do to correct those issues? Now, for the external influences, what is the state of their relationship with this Francophone country? I mean, their mother of Africa and a daughter, Dr. Arikana, and this lady from Kenya, Yombango, they've all spoken about the issue of the African Francophone countries coming to a point where they are becoming increasingly restive, tired, and dissatisfied with the state of relationship.
Yeah, and most of these coups have been happening in the Francophone countries.
Yes.
Surprisingly.
So we should be seeing that as warning signals, indicators and indices of a pending problem. And like I mentioned in the last outing, that I hope we are not seeing a Sahel spring, facing us and staring us in the face. And instead we're just focusing on the coup issue. Let's learn all the lessons that we can learn and begin to preemptively put some reforms in place. Some social service. You can see the way the people supported the coup.
I mean, that
tells you that there is something beyond
for ECOWAS, because
yes.
I mean, these people are coming out every day supporting the government and saying
so that tells you
this is their own government.
The coup actually has only echoed their voices. There are other issues, underlining issues.
And General, one of those other issues is the issues of the Wagner Group from Russia, and then the Nigerian coup plotter saying that, look, we have friends everywhere, just like Burkina Faso is making new friends with the Russians and all of that. What sort of role do you think Russia will play at the background to provide some sort of support?
Yeah, in fact, that makes it more complex. I've always talked of a complex web of interests in this matter. Now, let's look at the external influences. Russia, France, America. Of course, we know America has drone base in Niger. Of course, France, I mean, most of their military equipment and all of that, are manufactured by France and of course the training and all of that, so that part of it. Now, Russia coming to the scene, already been in Burkina Faso and in Mali. Of course, I mean, you remember when all the different groups and nations were condemning the coup. It was Wagner, leader that was hailing them. And for him, it's business. It's like getting an additional client.
Military contractors.
Yes, and increasing his clientele within the region. So for him, I mean, it's good business. So these are all the things we need to factor. Do we want to get involved in this mesh? To what benefit of ours? Even in the past where we went to ECOWAS, we went to Liberia, went to Sierra Leone and all that, the question has always been, what is our own benefit at the end of the day? Sorry.
Yes, I mean, you can still put it on.
You know, so unlike America, when America goes to intervene in a country, there are economic benefits.
Yes,
as the military are leading, the businessmen are following.
And that's what I'd wanted to ask you as to try to round off this conversation. If Nigeria were to put some boots on the ground and take a lead of this ECOWAS standby force and pump in lots of monies in dollar terms, what indeed should be our backroom policy in terms of the gains that we would have, so that we don't have it like Liberia, Sierra Leone and all of that, where we just end up spending about 10 billion US dollars and we don't seem to have contractors or the government even doing lots of economic dealings with us?
Yeah, it's obvious. Again, you know, the ability for you to take advantage of a situation is also a function of your inherent capacity to harness resources, the level of technology within your nation. I mean, when our own resources are also being just harnessed by foreigners and being taken out sometimes without us even knowing the exact things that have been, you know, looted and taken out. So to what extent can we even take advantage of economic opportunities? Those are challenges. Those are areas we have to look at. Because, I mean, how much have we turned our natural resources to wealth for the common good within our own nation? You know.
All right. Just before I let you go, General, the Nigerian Armed Forces at the moment is ranked well. In the past 8 years, we've seen some improvement and all of that in terms of kinetic warfare. But when you look at regional battles here and there, with how the Chadians have had to come in to help us with the fight against Boko Haram, at times showing some muzzle, and then, of course, even Niger, we had their troops coming into Sokoto at some point to help us. Do you think that this indeed is something that we still need to go ahead with, if indeed all the indices get set and President Bola Tinubu has to give this order? Considering the political solutions that people have been advocating, what would you advise President Tinubu to do just before another ECOWAS meeting?
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, as an analyst, you look at all the possibilities. You don't just zero down one line of thought. Okay, but having looked at the different possibilities, I'm so deeply persuaded that I don't see President Bola Tinubu agreeing to go into this war. I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening. Not with all the available, you know, inputs. The National Security Advisor is a Fulani person. Do you know the percentage of Hausa Fulani community in Niger? The Sultan of Sokoto, who led another delegation there. That's why I said, looking at the capacity and the knowledge of the statesmen that are already involved in the shuttle diplomacy, I don't see us. There's no who is advising the President Bola Tinubu that will not say still go ahead with a war like this. I don't see it happening.
Well, I'm afraid we'll just have to end it here. Such a good advice you're giving to the Nigerian government, and of course, several persons are saying that our economy doesn't seem to suggest that we can go on this war declared by ECOWAS. But President Tinubu is bound two ways. Number one, as president of Nigeria, and then number two, as chairman of ECOWAS, to actually take a decision that's been taken by everyone. But we must thank you so much. Major General Henry Ayoola is the former chief of, is a former general in the Nigerian Defense Ministry headquarters here in Abuja, so to say. He's been talking to us about all that we've seen happening in the past 48 hours, and of course, the near lack of consensus among Nigerians on whether or not we should actually embark on this war that ECOWAS has declared against the Republic of Niger. We must thank you immensely for joining us to help us understand the issues